That it? We live? Okay, good evening. You notice I'm not Lanny. If you're looking through your computer at home, I told him I would stand in for him, and the standing is about what I'm into for tonight. And it's 6 o'clock-ish, so here you go. I see we're still getting some eager beavers coming through the front door, so that's good. It's a nice lesson. Actually, this whole series, I got to looking at this series. This teaching quarter started March the 1st. Well, I was somewhat otherwise occupied on March the 1st. That was the night that I got kind of chest pains, and they gave me a helicopter ride to Tulsa, and so that made for an eventful March. In fact, I got to thinking this has been kind of an eventful. This has been an eventful this quarter anyhow. Us losing some members, and we had the gas leak Sunday or 2 or 3 ago. That was a big event. I don't know if we're going to call that a big event, but it sure got our attention. And I don't know, for those that haven't heard, Wes Ailey passed away. Was that today, Gail? So just for our congregation, a lot of things, and then I think all the time they were planning the trip to New Mexico, and so it's just been eventful, lots of things happening. But Lanny and them are gone to Gallup, New Mexico. As far as I know, that work is going okay. I meant to get on the phone and ask him. Jacob had a phone message to me asking how the Sunday morning youth class went, and I guess it went okay. They stayed there the whole time, and then they got up and went with their parents. That's the way it usually goes. But it went okay. Lanny had done some good notes on this. He's made handouts for a lot of the meetings, but didn't leave one for tonight. So I came up with a few things. He called this quarter diving into Daniel. Well, that's sure what we did. Gotten into it, and he had basically some analyses of all 12 chapters of Daniel, and those chapters varied kind of from the very last chapter is about 13 verses, and the longest chapter, 11, which we kind of talked about last week, was 45 verses. And that's also, in my measurement, that was the hardest one to understand. That had stuff about kingdoms and things about ancient history that I sure didn't get covered in school. But it was still, if nothing else, it's kind of humbling for me to know what I didn't understand and what is really difficult to understand no matter how hard you work at it. So I'm not going to dig back too much into chapter 11. I'm going to say Lanny did a good job on that, and we'll look at chapter 12. So, why don't you open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 12. I'll do the same. Perlin discovered in my book collection, I thought about getting commentaries or something like that for all these Old Testament books, and I realized that's way too deep for me. But I did buy some like quarterly lesson books or something, and I had one on the prophets, and he spends about 3 of the lessons on Daniel, and I was going to share a little bit of stuff out of that because he did pretty good. That's by Dr. John T. Willis. Turns out he was the head of a Old Testament Bible department at Abilene Christian University, so I felt like he had some good insights. He pretty much made a career out of becoming an Old Testament expert. So I thought that was worthwhile to look at. But everybody got chapter 12 in Daniel? I got page 962.
I found one page, but it doesn't help you any.
Oh, okay.
You have to have the questions filled out.
It's okay, I think. Of course, you know my wife. Okay. I think a lot of the pattern that Lanny had as he made out his handouts, he'd have some little introduction information, then he had observations. Well, instead of observations, I kind of looked over the different verses and I come up with like dumb questions or something, just like what's this stuff and that. And I thought that since I got a pretty gifted audience of scholars, that would just kind of work through some of those dumb questions that I come up with, and that'll take the place of the observations that you would have seen on a handout. Let's see. Let's look at chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has never not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. That's one verse. Some of my questions. Who is M? Who is Michael? I think he is. Yeah, that was it. That was what done. And next thing I put at what? Question mark. After Michael, the great prince who protects your people will arise, there will be a time of distress. I guess I put at what? Michael will arise. Okay, what does that mean? Realizing that what Daniel's seeing is a vision, right? I don't know if he's awake and kind of staring off in space, or whether he's like dreaming or something, but some kind of vision. Anybody in here seen a vision? Probably had dreams, but maybe you haven't seen a vision. Sometimes I daydream, and I think might think I've seen a vision or something, but it's really just daydream, and my thoughts go off somewhere. But Daniel, apparently God sent this information, and judging by what I read here, it's not that easy to understand. Yeah, the highway kind of has that look. Yeah.
If you know he's an angel, I wonder why you called him the great prince.
Well, one of the comments that I'd seen in there is that Michael is the great prince who protects your people will arise. Who you suppose that your people, and who Daniel's having this vision, and the great prince who protects your people, he writes this down. Yeah, that's kind of what I was coming at too, is it's your people, sort of God's people. Does that make any sense? Okay. All right, moving right along. How we doing with these dumb questions? That's my strategy. But you only got another hour to have to endure this. Okay, protects your people, and then, okay, we've got verse 2. How are we doing so far? That's one verse, and we've answered 2 or 3 dumb questions and comments. Okay, there will be a time of distress which has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. When did nations begin? Yeah, see, you have. Yeah, that's when they start mentioning the sons of Noah, and that turned into to nations. I'm not sure what significance that is. For that matter, I'm not sure what significance a lot of these questions I ask are. They come to myself. I look at the words and come up with the thoughts and or questions in my mind. A distress that's not happened since the beginning of the nations until then, but at that time, whenever that is, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Okay, written in the book. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Anybody got a thought? Well, that'd be my first thought too. I guess that's the best answer I can come up with. The book of life. Huh? Okay, good.
That seems so different because we're in the Old Testament and they're referring to something way off in Jesus' time.
Yeah, okay. I didn't say this would be easy.
Well, to me, we're looking at Revelations right here, in different words. Done with Christ. 22nd.
Yeah, I think Daniel is, if I'm recalling, around 600 BC, somewhere in there. That's when this got wrote down, when Daniel had these visions. The other thing is the prophecy, the book of Daniel, is kind of the first half of it roughly, is a little bit about history, and all these exciting stories like Daniel in the lion's den and the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. And I call that the exciting people that are part of Daniel. That's the part I was acquainted with growing up, because I'd been to Sunday school, and when they have Sunday school lessons, you want to have exciting lessons. So those things are exciting. You get into maybe some of these histories of nations and kings of the north and south, and I don't know about you, but either it's not as exciting or else I'm just not as familiar with it. Sometimes familiarity breeds interest, and other times it just sort of bewilders you. I'm kind of in the bewildered stage on some of that stuff. Okay, let me try something on verse 2. Let's see. Multitudes who keep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. And I got, who are the multitudes? Question mark. All the people in the dust? Oh yeah, that made sense to me too. So I guess they're in the grave somewhere or another. Okay. I don't have any other questions. That's about the only thing I come up with on verse 2. Verse 3. Shh. I got to get my reading glasses adjusted. Found out there is a correct focal length, and if you get it right, those words are easier to read. Verse 3, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Who are the wise?
Those who follow God.
Yeah. The wise, and it talks about those who lead others to God. And what do you reckon they did to lead others to God? Huh? Yep, use words. Yep, sometimes that word, sometimes maybe their life example or something, just the way they are. Okay, you're getting a lot of these things, questions. I'm gonna have to, you going for an A or something in this class? Yes. Okay.
Trying to move up my spot.
Bump your average up. Okay. All right, I think I just finished verse 3. Here we go on verse 4. But you, Daniel, close up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge. Okay? Let's see, who's doing the talking here? Yep, that's my guess, best guess. Until the time at the end. That phrase came up. But you, Daniel, close up to seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Have any thoughts on what that is?
I still don't know the end of time.
Well, the answer in a lot of these is, for me, is I don't know. And since this is a vision of Daniel, and so a lot of times these visions and things, they don't really nail down to an exact historical time or date or something. So
I said,
I'm gonna,
knowledge came when Jesus was here.
who came?
Jesus.
Okay.
And he is true knowledge. So, I mean, Daniel wasn't around to open the book back up, but
Yeah.
What is this reference to? Again, into Revelations when they open the scrolls.
Yeah, it's
Or we're not speaking of it necessarily, but really the same thing. Yeah.
okay. So that was that question was what until the time of the end, and question mark, when is the end? Well, we don't know a date, which is that's what Jesus said too, is that when he comes again, when the end of time, no one knows except for the Father.
I was reading this book that, not one you had, it was Unger's Concordance,
Oh yeah, Bible dictionary.
Bible Dictionary, and that was so confusing because it would talk about, I won't get the words right, premillennialists, and then the A,
Yeah, more words that are not in the Bible anyway.
and keeping comparing them back and forth, and that was so confusing. And that's authors that research this.
Yeah, and I believe that all these scholars that write these Bible dictionaries and commentaries and even lesson books, I'm sure the man that wrote this lesson quarterly, he's way smarter than I am. But instead of having like a one-line observation, things like Lanny did, he sort of just wrote paragraphs and things, and that kind of reading is more difficult for me than the one-liners. But anyway, I think I'm getting off subject here. I would say many will go here and there to increase knowledge.
People were studying all the different things that had been previously
Okay?
defined.
Good place to start as anyone that I know of. Yeah, I guess we go around, we try to learn things. And we call it knowledge, and hopefully if it's relevant to the problems or the things that we're dealing with, then so be it. Okay, that was the questions I had on verse 4. How are we doing so far? Are we it seems like at least I'm getting y'all to talk about my dumb questions. Appreciate that. Okay, verse 5. You see here, get that. I also find I'm having to read with my finger quite a bit. Then I, Daniel, looked, And there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river and the one on the opposite bank. Two others. Ideas? The one commentary guy said that, well, it's by two witnesses that things get established. So you had Daniel there, I guess, seeing things, visions, whatever. These two others, whoever they are, whatever they are, one on one side of the river, one on the other. Back in chapter 10 and verse 5, I think, talked about someone that kind of resembled one of this other. That's probably the next verse.
When you first read that, I thought about the mountains, that they could be like the signs of the river, and they had the mount of blessings and the mount of cursings.
Oh, I guess that didn't come to my mind, but doesn't mean it doesn't have some merit. The river, yeah, I had a river question mark, and yeah, I mentioned about the number of the two sort of being the minimum number of witnesses to sort of establish a fact or something like that, to establish something true. The river was mentioned back in chapter 10 verse 5 was the river Tigris, I think. Okay, verse 6. I want to read that. I had a little bit of stuff to some more questions. Verse 6. Okay, we had these two on either side of the river. One of them said to the man clothed in linen. Now, where to bring? I know. Okay, one of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? Okay, the figure that's above the waters of the river, which that was mentioned back as the river Tigris, back in chapter 10. And he asked this question, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? I think, yeah, one of the questions I came up with. And also that picture of the man clothed in linen, that also shows up in Revelation, first chapter. As you might recall some of that. Someone dressed in linen, maybe feet kind of like burnished bronze. Is some of these words coming back from some of your readings? And then I came up with a question, astonishing things, question mark. What we're talking about? What astonishing things? Say again? That's pretty astonishing. Okay. Yeah, but you still can't help but wonder, when should we be looking for this or something? Yeah. And it seemed like a lot of people come up with that little question in their mind, even if they don't both speak it, they still wonder, I'm going to wonder when that's going to happen. Okay. You're on a roll, buddy. All that drug training you got is paying off. Okay, let's see. That was verse 6. Okay, verse 7. The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand towards heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. When the power of the holy people, has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. So I guess that was his answer, or one answer to that question of how long, or when is it going to happen, or something like that. Did y'all get that out of this? Give you a minute or two to think about it. I had a lot more in a minute, and I'm not sure if I came up with the right answers. Man clothed in linen, who was above the waters, and that's pretty similar to who we were talking about in Revelation even. And I think this was somebody that kind of looked like the Son of Man, which is often talked about as like the Son of God. Don't mean to draw this same things that it doesn't say, but that's the best thing that came in my head. Lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven. That used to be sometimes the praying stance that that Jesus would have, lifted up both hands, which is just fine too. There'd be nothing wrong. It would probably attract attention, because when we pray in public or in the congregation, we often bow our heads, something like that. But in my view, there'd be nothing wrong with lifting up hands. I've seen it done some, just not that much. And but rather than a prayer, I heard him swear by him who lives forever. Who would that be? That's right. It'll be for a time, times, and half time. You got a footnote or something that says what that is? 3.5, okay. Yep. That's what I've seen in a number of things. And sometimes I tried to equate that to the calculation of days and stuff that they come with. It doesn't calculate the same way. They're not talking about 365-day years, or else I'm messing up in my math, which that happened a lot in school. So, yeah, go ahead and giggle. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, time, times, and half time. That's how long it'll be. And when the power of the holy people has been finally broken. I wonder what that means. When the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all things will be completed. Verse 7. Yeah, that was my question. I got an idea. When the power of the holy people is broken. You're the scholars, don't look at me. The what? Maybe they call them the Holy Spirit people, which I figure they thought of priests as being holy. Yeah, well, that's a picture in your mind you can't forget. Okay. Well, let's just say that's good enough for right now, unless somebody said. Okay. Denny gets a good one on that. Okay. Okay. The rest of them, I didn't have that many questions, but so I'm just going to read kind of a verse at a time, and then we'll sort of talk about them. We'll talk about observations or or dumb questions or whatever you come up with, we come up with, and see what discussion we can have. This is kind of a short chapter, so. Verse 8. Get my finger in the right spot. Okay. This is Daniel. I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, my Lord, what will be the outcome, or what will the outcome of all this be? That, in view of what he saw, all of the strange things that he probably saw and didn't really understand, is all he could do to get it written down or something. So that would probably be my start, Mike. Well, what's all this mean? What's the outcome going to be? Other thoughts? I'm sure that'll get better as you get older. Okay. Anyhow, what'll the outcome of this be? Verse 9. He replied, go your way, Daniel. How's this for an answer? Go your way, Daniel, because the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. That's pretty definite, isn't it? I get the idea that a number of the Bible writers maybe didn't understand completely what they were writing down, especially the prophets, and maybe it seemed like in the New Testament, at least when Paul wrote his letters, he probably had pretty good things in mind, because he was trying to coach the churches and the brethren into proper behavior, proper attitudes, and things like that. But the prophets definitely, and maybe even some of the historians of old, excuse me. That could be. Other thoughts before we look at verse 10? Verse 10, many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty close to what meaning what it says and saying what it means. The way we get wise is to be attuned to the words of God, scriptures. Okay? Nobody else got more stuff? Here goes verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. That's a pretty definite number. And I'll stop there because that's verse 11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished, I guess that's, the priests quit doing their duty. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, did it get said that around 70 AD when the Romans? Okay. Okay.
I'm sure they, just because they couldn't disprove Jesus, I'm sure the Sadducees kept up their facade.
You think?
That was their whole money.
Yeah, so they sold doves and cows and sheeps and whatever they, yeah.
I will keep up the facade, keep the cash flow.
That probably happened to some degree. It could be that, that's just guessing and speculation. Okay, verse 12, getting focal length adjusted. Blessed is the one who waits and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. I have no clue. I don't know if Lanny mentioned something about that. I kind of looked around at notes. I messed around with times and half a times and did some calculations, and it didn't, I didn't get anything that exactly matched, but other thoughts?
The days gets me because when they say weeks, it means years. So I'm sure days means days.
As I recall, Randy, Frank was telling us earlier, these references to the thousands, times, and all this, really was a way of saying a long, long time. I'm not gonna tell you exactly when it was gonna be a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that they kind of nailed a number there, but there may be a reason why they mentioned that number, so I just kind of leave it at that. I don't have anything better to offer.
When they offer numbers like that, it kind of gets me because back when they were numbering the people, they had exact numbers. This is how many people in there. It's like, they were wrong in doing it, but there was a purpose in it.
Yeah, I don't know if the Apostle Paul would have had any better insights. He grew up around the feet of Gamaliel. He was about as Jewish as a Jew could be, and probably between Paul and Gamaliel, you would have thought that about as much Jewish knowledge as there could be got or discussed, and but that's not given for us. Last verse. As for you, go your way till the end, and you will rest. Then at the end of the rest, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. Who's doing the talking there? Verse 13. Huh? It's as good a guess as mine. It made someone that seemed to have the authority to say that kind of thing. The who? Yeah, that's sort of either the Lord or Jesus or someone is that linen person with the burnished feet and stuff like that. That's the best I could see that. maybe them numbers meant something to somebody.
Well, sometime out there, Christ saved himself, I don't know. But it's done.
Pretty definite way of a I don't know, isn't it, though? To give a definite number, but who am I to say? Okay, well, there we are at the book of Daniel. I wanted to share a few things out of this little book that Perlin dug off my shelf, because it's what he said I thought was worth saying. First off, you remember all these things, the table of contents talks about, in a little game, we got time for a game. Try to figure out why Lanny put these titles on his little lessons or handouts, through the week. Chapter 1, what's for dinner? Why did he say that? About the Daniel, the boys wouldn't eat the rich stuff? Okay. Pre-recorded history 101. I assume that's just all the history and stuff that he wrote about that. Chapter 3, it's getting hot in here. That one shouldn't be so hard. Nebuchadnezzar's nightmare. That's pretty descriptive. Here's your sign. Say, that would be my guess. Okay. Chapter 6 is that hanging out with Daniel. I didn't have all these thought out to do. I think that's right. I quickly thumbed through all the Daniel and tried to get the major big stories, and I think you're right. Chapter 7, Strange Visions, Part 1. And Chapter 8, Strange Visions, Part 2. Well, that's a lot of that weird stuff that we didn't understand so good, and so I'll just leave it at that. Chapter 9, Daniel's prayer for God's people. That's pretty descriptive there too. Chapter 10, Meeting God's Agent. Huh? Maybe a Michael and Gabriel or something like that. That's kind of his say. And chapter 11, things may get worse before they get better. Yeah, we talk about the kingdoms and the Jewish. I guess they figure the Jews, the nation of Israel, would kind of get absorbed up in a lot of that violence and stuff like that. And chapter 12, what we did tonight, I don't know if it came through that way, but the light at the end of the tunnel. See if I can show this stuff with you right quick out of this book from Dr. Willis. It's kind of neatly put on things. I thought I would recognize it pretty quick. Sometimes I think I'll recognize things, and when I'm standing before a group or a class or something, what I thought I would think through well doesn't happen. Here we go. Basically, he titles, Dr. Willis said, the Jews under the Medo, Persia, and Greece, that's talked about in chapters 10 through 12. So that's a lot of what's been covered in the last 3 weeks. These 3 chapters belong together. That they're strikingly similar in content and concern chapters 8 and 9. The heart of this material is in chapter 11. That's the hard one, that's the long one, the one I had the most trouble with, which predicts major events which occur from Alexander the Great to Archicus IV, Epiphanes. These chapters fall into 3 parts. The angel appears to Daniel and encourages him in chapter 10. The angel reveals to Daniel major events involving the Jews from Alexander Great to Epiphany and all those kings that you may or may not be familiar with. And then finally, the man clothed in linen encourages Daniel, and that's what we just talked about. He said, this, and this man is pretty smart. I mean, to me, he spent his life, he's an Abilene Christian, the professor of the Old Testament. He said this: having studied through the book of Daniel, it is important now to assemble briefly some of its main teachings. And I thought this was worth it. Just read a few sentences. God is completely in control of kingdoms and individuals. And yeah, that seems right. Number 2, we're doing pretty good time. God's kingdom will ultimately prevail over all the kingdoms of men. You know, we're pretty proud to be an American, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to be in any other country. But there could be a time when good old USA, I have no idea what it would look like. It probably were some of my worst nightmare. Anyway, that was number 2. God's kingdom will ultimately prevail over all the kingdoms of men. Number 3, behind the earthly conflict between good and evil is the heavenly struggle between good and bad angels. I think Lanny mentioned that too. That's even going on. That's strange. You know, you think when we get to heaven, everything will be perfect and it'll be peachy. And you mean there's stuff, all that stuff going on in heaven, maybe people that are angels, or somebody doesn't want to be in authority, or doesn't want to be subject to the living God. Is such a condition exists? Think about it. Number 4, God punishes his people for their sins, but he delivers them by his grace. Thank the Lord. And I think there were just 5 of them. Let me get the last one. God's people must remain faithful to him, even if it causes persecution and death. And we saw that in the book of Daniel. So, all the stuff I put together, and I only cover about 50 minutes of my allotted time. Of course, we leave about 5 to do any of the gossiping and updates on the brethren. Comments, thoughts. Appreciate everybody answering my dumb questions and things like that and discussing this stuff. There you go. All right. Had a finger up or something. That's interesting. Yeah, the something like happened in Minneapolis or something like that, or Selma, Alabama, could occur. You know, I kind of like to think that heaven going to be some bliss, and maybe I won't want to sin. I hope. I mean, I fought against it here, you know, and of course they talk about sin being earthly stuff, and I hope I hope my sinful nature really gets defeated, so I don't want to do it. Oh, you think I'm about to pull it off, huh? Okay, other thoughts?
Well, there's times I feel totally unworthy when you hear about all the history and the deaths in the scriptures. I always pray that I'm worthy enough. I don't know what's coming to the future, but I have to face that somebody, as crazy as people are nowadays, can look at the gun and say, denounce your Lord. You know, I couldn't, but yet I just hope I'm strong enough that I can stand there. We've got it so easy.
Well, you told the one church in Revelation 2:10. Only reason I remember this is it was my confirmation scripture back when I used to be a little. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give you the crown of life. So I guess if I can stand up when it counts. And of course it doesn't, I don't think it depends on my bravery and certainly not my goodness. The goodness part, the one whom it depends on is Jesus. And he died on the cross. And that's good that we remember him every Sunday. And, you know, different ones of us try to bring a thought out that helps us keep that in mind.
Children of lies. So, if it ever comes to that, you might as well go to your reward.
Amen. Okay. Landon, you think we ought to break it off of the air by about now? Okay. Thank you.